This is the Uploading Files with Blazor mini course. So far, we've seen how to upload one or many files, how to associate files with form data, and how to store our data in SQL. Now we want to display our data from SQL back onto the web page. We'll work through setting up web-friendly links, loading data, and more in this video. Now, this video is part of a mini course around uploading files. I would encourage you to click on the playlist link in the description and use it to go through the course in order. There's also a link down there for the source code from this video. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and my goal is to make learning C# easier. I have hundreds of videos here on YouTube, with more coming out each week. I have a podcast answering questions developers have, and I provide training courses designed to give you the real-world training and experience needed to succeed in today's marketplace. You can find all the resources I have to offer at iamtimcorey.com. Okay, so picking up where we left off, we have the application running. So if we were to run this, we can load it up. We will see that it actually works. We could save information to a database. We have a database. Let's close this out and look at our database. We have our customer table, which right now has just one record in it. It has the Tim Corey record. Okay, but we want to go a bit further and actually display the data back onto the web page. In fact, we'll use the same index page. That's just fine. We'll display it below our table or our input table. So let's create a new store procedure. And we're going to call this SP customer underscore get all. And no parameters. We're just going to get all the records. So we'll say begin, end, and select star from dbo.customer. Now, I'm violating some rules here. We should probably do a quick actions refactoring here, which I believe doesn't load right now for some reason for me. But you can expand this out to be all the columns. And that's usually better than select star. So usually you want to expand this out. If using SSDT, that would work. But you want to expand this out because you want to have the columns in the right order. So you want to have ID, first name, last name, file name, username in the order you expect them to. That way, if it doesn't happen all the time, but if you're expecting the columns in a certain order, you don't get confused or have the application crash if you adjust column order in the database. Also, if you say select star, then if we add 10 or 15 more columns, we're sending back all that extra data that we're not expecting to need. But in our case, we're just going to say select star. It's the easiest, it works, and it will get us the information quickly. So let's execute this. We can close it out. If we were to come back over here to store procedures and refresh, we'll see now we have the get all. So we now have the store procedure we need, but we need to write some code in our SQL data access. We only have the save data. So let's create the load data method. Public async task of type list of type T. So we're going to return a list of T, which we have to say load data of type T. And this is going to be whatever model we want. And let's do this on a new line because we're going to need to have multiple. In fact, we're going to do this. These right here, that'll be the three things we pass in. And let's make this nullable. Oops. Because you might have a null set of parameters. In fact, we will, because we're not actually going to use any parameters. We're going to just say, give me everything. There's no parameters to pass in. So now we do basically the same thing that this does. We copy these first two lines. We're going to get the connection string. We're going to open the connection. But then we're going to say var rows equals await connection dot query async. And the query async, by the way, query async and execute async, that's the only parts that Dapper is actually doing, just so you know. So we're going to say a type T. So in here, let's go to a new line. We're going to say, actually the same stuff is down here. So let's just copy and paste this. It's the same basic command. It's just that we're saying, hey, you're going to return some data, some rows. And this row is going to be an I enumerable of type T, and it is nullable. And then down here, we're going to say return rows.toList. You want to return a list of type T. So we're using generics here. And if you're not familiar, I have a video on YouTube on generics and what they mean. But essentially, this makes it very, very flexible for us to use whatever model we want to get our data in. We have to tell it what structure to return our data in. So saying this is the model that you want to return our data into. And we're going to use that same customer model. So that's all it took to create our load data. But we're not quite done yet because we have this interface. The cool thing is we can say control dot on our load data and say pull load data up to iSQL data access. So I click that. And now if we open up iSQL data access, we see that load data is there as well. So we've now moved that up into our interface, which means that we can now come over to our index.Blazor page, come down to our code. Let's put it right up here since we're working with it. And we're going to say, actually, we need to add a private variable here. Private list of customer model. And we'll make this nullable called customers and not put a value in it right away. So this is going to be our list of customers from the database. And we're going to say private async task load customers. And this is my favorite part about Dapper and using it is how easy it is to set things up. So we're going to say customers, which is our list of customer model, it's nullable, equals await SQL.load data of type customer model. And then let's pass in our dbo.sp customer dot, was it get all? I believe so. It was get all, yep. And then we're going to say default for our connection string name and then null for any parameters. That's it. That's our entire command to load all the records in the customer model or customer table into the list of customer model. That's it. All we got to do. So let's do this a couple times. First of all, let's do this on load. So protected override on initialized async. And this is getting a little bit funky. So I want you to watch what happens when I type this. Okay, I'm going to say await in space, and notice how it took my cursor. Now, if you can see that or not, the cursor is now up on line 53, and it's right before task, which means if you start typing and you say await space and then start typing right away, you'll type in the wrong spot. So that's a little funky. It's something the editor does because it wants to put this async marker in the method. So if we were to back this out, notice that there's no async here. So when I say await, it says, oh, you need async there. So it puts async there, but leaves the cursor where it was or where it is instead of bringing it back down to where it was. So that's a little bit funky. If you see it happen, that's what's going on. Load customers. So that's the load of the customers. So whenever we initialize the page, it's going to load the customers and place them on the page. Well, at least place them in this list. We haven't actually put on a page yet. But the other place we want to do this, let's copy this, is going to be after we successfully save data. Let's go ahead and load the customers. That way we can see the latest value right away. But how do we actually display this information on the page? Well, let's come up here to after the errors. Let's do it after the errors. We can do it after before, but let's do it after. We're going to say at if customers is not null. So as long as you have customers in the list, so there's no customers, don't display anything. But if you do, then we're going to say, let's create an H2, and we'll say existing customers and then we'll create a table. And you may have heard some things about HTML and people saying, hey, don't ever use table. And for the most part, they're right, because table has been abused for years because it was a great little layout thing. And so people created tables to do layout. And that's not what it's for. A table is for data. But what are we displaying here? Data. So therefore, it's the right call to use a table. Class equals table and table bordered. This is, again, from Bootstrap 5. It just makes our tables look nicer. We're going to do t-head, and then tr, and then ths. So again, this is something that I taught in the Web Development Master Course, how to deal with these properly with HTML5 and CSS3, and making sure that we're doing things the right way for a modern web. It's important to use things like t-head and create a row for your header values and so on. Okay, so let's create 4 of these, and we'll say first name, and we'll say here last name. And this last one is going to be the actual profile picture. Okay, so that's going to be the actual image that we store whenever we upload a new user. And we already have one of those in our file. So that's associated with that SQL record, and that's associated with Tim Corey. So we will be able to see that when we start actually loading stuff on the page. So let's go with tbody and do a for each. So the for each is going to loop over the customers. So we're going to say var c in customers. So we're going to loop through all the customers. We've already done a check, by the way, to make sure that customer is not null. Therefore, you don't have to do a null check here because it can't be null if we're inside here because we've already done a null check. So just to kind of clear that up. So now we have, for each person, each customer, we're going to have a tr. Inside here, we'll have tds. And the first one's going to be at c.id. I use c because it's short, which makes it a little easier and a little shorter on our page. And let's say the next one is going to be first name. And we're doing a quick and easy display of this. This last one here is going to be a bit different because it's nullable, and it could be, if it is not null, we want to display it as an image. So at if string.is null or white space, because it could be an empty string, which also is not a file name, c.filename equals false. So if it's not null or white space. Now again, some people would say, well, you can just put a bang character there and not have the equals false. Absolutely. However, this right here, it's harder to see that this is not. It jumps out at you is null or white space. Looking over here to find not is a little harder, but this way you can very easily see false. So makes it a little easier to read quickly. Image, src equals at, and we need to actually pass, let's just leave it blank for now. We need to pass in a value here that is the full path name, because we have right now a relative path name. Now let's set the width of this equal to just 400 for now. We can, this would be something more specific, but that's fine. Okay, so right now the image will be blank, but it will be there as a placeholder. Let's start with this first and make sure that just Tim Corey is showing up, and that it looks kind of right without the image. We'll get the image next. And so far, this looks right. We have ID of 1, Tim Corey, profile picture. Let's add Noah Macy, and let's choose Noah's profile picture and say create customer. When we do, hey, there he pops up. There we go, and his image is over in the folder as well. So it's working. It's just not displaying profile pictures yet. But how do we display profile pictures? Because the relative path isn't going to work quite yet, because of the fact that it's not really accessible by the web server. You can't say, hey, go to the D drive. That doesn't work like that with web servers. You actually have to map it to a path the web server understands. Now, I would highly encourage you, and this is another thing we'll cover in the next lesson on best practices, but we'll talk about it now. I would highly encourage you to not put your uploaded files in the same location as the rest of your web files, because it's a safety concern. It's something you want to make sure that you separate those two things. We'll talk more about that later, but we are going to put them in the same location because we only have one web server. We don't have access to the actual configuration of Kestrel. We're not going to get into that right now. This is supposed to be a demo. And so we're going to give them a web-friendly location. So let's go to www.root, and we'll right-click on here and say add a new folder. We'll call it images. You see, we could probably even call it profile images. Profile images. Okay, that way it's very, very clear what it's for. Now, when it comes to accessing this, when we say how to save it on the hard drive, if we right-click and say open folder in File Explorer, this is the path. Okay, it's C, temp, upload file solution, upload files app, www.root, profile images. Okay, we can copy this. We can come over here to app settings.json, and we can paste this in. And notice it puts a double slash in there, which is good. So that's the location now of where we want our root of our file storage to be. But we've already uploaded stuff, and it's already in the database. We have to modify the database, right? Well, no, we don't. What we can do is we can come over here to our previous location, which is storage, and just move, well, in this case, copy, but move stuff over to it. So now tcorey and the two image file locations are there. And we'll see that this still works. But what we want to do, though, is we want to have a relative path. So when we run the web server, it's going to, and let's actually run the web server now. I want to show you that the relative path is actually profile images / tcorey / and then it's, let's see, scsrxfwx.png. There you go. There's Noah's picture. Because that's the relative path, is this right here. And if we were to actually say just dot, it would take it from localhost and say / profile images and so on. So we want to use that path for accessing it. So let's say the web storage root is going to be / and that's going to be profile images. Okay, because then we're going to start with our actually I think it's there we go. I think that way will work, and put a comma at the end. And what's going to do is that's going to allow us, let's go back to this way. That's going to allow us to merge those paths together and say, okay, this dot profile images dot or / tcorey / and then the file name. And that will allow us to use a relative path in the web, but when we're saving it, we're actually saving it to a real location, a real file system location. So kind of a mixed bag there. Again, just to be very, very clear, I would not do it this way for a production application because this stores in the same place as where your source control is, which means that every time I save now, this is going to be storing to source control. Now, I could exclude this folder from source control using the git ignore file, and I could do that, and that would work. And I could say, hey, the profile images folder, ignore that folder, create the folder, but ignore all the files in there, and then it will just use that folder from now on. I could do that, but I still wouldn't do it that way. I would probably do it a different way. I'd probably store a different location that everyone has access to, a different file system location that we could set up in IIS or in Apache or wherever else and say, this is the web path for it, this is the physical path for it, and this is where our image will be stored. So in a real application, it gets a little bit larger and a little bit more complex. But for our simple application, this works. Even for a small application, this would work as long as you just used gitignore to ignore this folder. So, but as you get larger, you want to separate those out. Okay, so we now have this set up. Now we need to go back and actually have a way to combine these or get these locations. So let's create a new method, private string create full path, and string relative path. And that's the path you're going to pass in. And we need to do a path.combine, basically. Return path.combine config dot get value type string. We're going to talk to our app settings.json and get the value we just created, which is web storage root. So we get the web storage root, and we're going to combine that with, and yes, we're going to say, you know what? We know it's there. So exclamation point at the end to, because it's saying now, hey, it's getting null. And we're saying, no, it's not null. Don't worry about it. We could do a full check on this. We probably should do a full check to make sure that our app settings are correct. But for this specific case, we're not going to. Worst case, it gives us some broken links that we have to go say, oh, we don't have the right path in our app settings.json. So we're going to pass in relative path and be done. So it combines the relative path we're passing in with the web storage root to get a full path. We can create the web path. Let's call it web path instead. So create web path. So the source is create web path and say c dot file name. So pass in the file name, which is the relative path, use it to create a web path for this, and give us our images. Let's make sure this works. Hey, look at that. We actually have profile pictures for Tim and Noah. So if we were to say Dan White, and we were to say upload Dan's picture, there we go. Let's just round out the team here. Tom Thiele, and choose Tom's picture. Whoops. Create customer. There we go. There we go. We now have a database that has all of our pictures. Every time you come to this page, we'll have all of our pictures here, all of our data loaded from the SQL database, and our www root profile images /tquery has all the images in there uploaded just fine, so that it all just works. Okay. So we now have a fully working demo. We can see how to upload a file or files. We know how to take that and associate the form data. We know how to upload that to SQL. We know how to get it out of SQL and display it on a web page, how to use the relative paths for web pages versus the full path for the file system for saving. And we've even seen some best practices on how to work with this, but we're not quite done yet. Next up, what we're going to do is cover some very specific best practices around all of this, talk through kind of more of the big picture stuff we've talked about a little bit. We haven't fully covered yet, though, some things to look out for, some pitfalls to avoid, some dangers to avoid when dealing with uploading files, when dealing with using uploaded files or uploaded file data, and how to work with that properly. So that's coming up next in the best practices video. Until then, thanks for watching. If you want the source code for this, go down that link in the description. If you want to see the previous videos, there's a playlist link in the description where you can see all the videos in order. And thank you for watching. Thanks for being a part of this. And as always, I am Tim Corey.